was that decision making. In the blue on the bottom, I just want you to focus on that for a second. EA makes information transparent. That CGEA stands for Coast Guard Enterprise Architecture. It makes information transparent to enable better decision making. That's what it's all about in our organization. In terms of our program at the Coast Guard, we've made huge progress. I've been at the Coast Guard for 2 years. I went over there from the Secret Service, where I was the chief architect for 3 years prior. In the last 2 years at the Coast Guard, we released the first 2 versions of the Coast Guard Enterprise Architecture. That was 10 years after the Clear-Cohen Act mandated enterprise architecture. So that tells you where we were. So we've made huge progress. From a planning perspective, 2 versions of enterprise architecture. The second, in terms of governance, because remember I told you it's about planning and governance, we've instituted a new IT Investment Review Board supported by an Enterprise Architecture Board to conduct technical reviews of proposed new IT projects, products, and standards. So that's our enforcement mechanism for the EA. And I'm going to talk to you more about that in a couple of minutes. So why do we do EA? What's the purpose? Why do we invest in a program? Why do we hire a chief enterprise architect like me? Well, there are 6 major benefits we talk about with enterprise architecture. First of all, investment management, and we touched upon that a minute ago. EA guides sound IT investment decision making. We do that through the target, we do that through a transition plan, and we do that through the governance board, through the enterprise architecture board that I mentioned to you. Also, we develop the strategic plan. In fact, my office right now, we just are completing our 5-year strategic plan, again replacing a previous Coast Guard plan from 1998. We're making huge progress. Okay? In the planning process, we do problem analysis. Okay? We uncover gaps and redundancies, roadblocks and opportunities. And we use that to drive business process improvement and re-engineering and the introduction of new technologies. EA is not about just IT. It's about business and IT. Remember what I told you earlier. Business drives technology. So we're looking at business process improvement. We're looking at new technology. In terms of knowledge management, enterprise architecture is a tremendous information asset to the organization. Okay, we have a repository for that information, and we make it easy to understand and readily available for everyone in the Coast Guard. And in terms of requirements management, that ties back to governance. Remember I told you, we validate all our user requirements against the enterprise architecture. We have a systems inventory, we have a products and standards inventory. Before somebody goes out and wants to invest money in something new, we check what we currently have today. We make sure that what we're investing in is a good investment. You know, do we have something today that can already be an 80% solution before we go out and spend more money? So how does it all work? It's a 4-step process. We use the analogy for the process, input, process, output, and outcome. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. Very often a system is described in those terms. In terms of the inputs, we capture lots of information. Okay, it's a spaghetti diagram of all the information that comes in: strategy, goals, business opportunities, current and emerging technologies, mandates and requirements. In the second step, we process that information. We analyze it, we catalog it. In the third step, we take that information, we serve it back out to the organization. And in my approach, which I call User-Centric Enterprise Architecture, we focus on serving up that information in useful and usable ways. We don't develop artifacts, we develop information products. Artifacts is an archaeological term. You know, it's rusty, it's old, it's dirty, you don't want to touch it, it's shelfware. That's not what we develop. We determine who the user is and why they're going to, what they need the product for before we go out and spend money and develop enterprise architecture information. And the final step, the outcome goes back to the goal. Improve planning and governance through the architecture. How do we know we're doing that? Cost savings, cost avoidance, okay? Performance improvement in the organization. So when we talk about enterprise architecture, and remember I mentioned to you a couple of minutes ago, it's an information asset. Well, what information? What the heck are we talking about? Well, there's 6 perspectives. 3 are business, and 3 are owned by the business, 3 are owned by the technology folks. Okay, it's split down the middle. And we built our framework like a clock. Okay, and you read it clockwise. Okay, and it aligns very closely to the federal enterprise architecture for those that are familiar with those perspectives. At the top, performance. That's the pinnacle of the architecture and the organization. Those are the results of operation that we're trying to achieve with our organizations. And it's supported by the business, the functions, processes, activities, and tasks that we do, the information that's required to perform those, the systems that serve up the information, the underlying technology, the hardware, the software, the products, the standards, and then how do we secure all of those? That's the type of information. But what's really important in my approach that I implemented at the Coast Guard and the Secret Service isn't necessarily the type of information, but how we view the information. Okay? Because, again, at the end of the day, you have different users in the organization. In my organization, we have the commandant at the very spear of the organization at the top. We have people, analysts, and operators who are running the boats and the planes. Okay? They don't need information in the same way. So we developed a unique three-tier model. We call it the different levels of information: profiles, models, and inventories. As the graphic shows you, the profile is a big picture view. That's for the commandant and executive decision makers like the CIO, the CFO, the CPO. Okay? Big picture view, strategic view of the organization. The bottom, at the other end of the spectrum, those are your inventories and catalogs, detailed configuration items with lots of information about them. That's what your business and system analysts are going to use. And in the middle layer, those are your models, business data systems models. It's about relationships. Your mid-level managers need that information. It's how processes interrelate, how systems interoperate, how information is exchanged. You can't make decisions without knowing the impact of one area on the other. When we bring the last two slides that we talked about together, we have a product framework. Okay? For those of you who are familiar with Zachman, it's not very dissimilar to that. Okay? The columns are the types of information, the rows are the levels of information that we talked about. So for example, if you look at the business column, which is the second one in, you have a business profile at the top, you have a business model, you have a business inventory. The profile looks in the Coast Guard at the functions that we perform. The model looks at the processes that we do. And the inventory looks at the distinct activities that we do to accomplish our mission and drive results. And the vision for how this all works is for all these products to be linked together. You can navigate from one to another. So as a user, you browse the information you're looking for. You find what you need. You can roll it up to an executive level, or you can drill down to get further analysis and detail. It's pretty cool. All the information, and that previous slide showed an initial build of 60 information products that we've built for the Coast Guard. It all comes down to planning, EA planning. Okay? Current. We look at a current, we look at a target, and we look at a transition plan. Right? The current is where we are today. What's the baseline for our business and our technologies? And the target, where do we want to be? Usually we're talking 3 to 5 years down the road as our planning horizon. And that transition plan, how are we going to get there? Who's the point of contact? What's the timeline for each of those things? And it ties right into the strategic plan that I was talking to you about earlier. And as the graphic shows here, we're generally moving from a more chaotic environment to a more structured environment. That's what we're trying to do. Order out of chaos. Okay, I told you earlier, EA is about planning and governance. This diagram shows you the interrelationship between those two. On the left side, you have the enterprise architecture. So that's the information. Remember, I told you, it's a strategic information asset base. Lots of information. Right? Baseline target transition plan. And what does that do? With that information, you can drive decision making through your enterprise architecture board and your investment review board. That's your capital planning and investment control process. Right? You're no longer making decisions in the dark by the seat of your pants. Okay? You now have information to make decisions on. You have a plan to base it off of. You can validate what you're trying to do. You can have program sponsors come in, brief their projects, brief their proposed investments, and you can come up with conditions, findings, and recommendations before moving out on them. And then those decisions feed back. It's a cycle, it's a loop. Those decisions now feed back into the architecture. So now you have a new baseline. It's constantly evolving. EA is a program and not a project. So how do we make it real? Okay, is it all academic or is it real? It's real. This is a snapshot of our website at the Coast Guard. Okay? This is our homepage. At the right, you'll see it's familiar to a slide that you saw a couple of minutes ago.